Stand ye heroes and swear with proud disdain, the wretch that would ensnare you shall spread his net in vain. Should Europe empty all her force, will meet them in array, and fight and shout and fight for free America. We led fair freedom hither, and lo, the desert smiled. A paradise of pleasure was opened in the wild. Your harvest bold Americans no power shall snatch away. Preserve, preserve, preserve your rights in a free America. Torn from a world of tyrants beneath this western sky, we formed a new dominion, a land of liberty. The world shall own we're free men here, and such will ever be. Huzzah, 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 for free America. Some future day shall crown us the masters of the main. Our fleet shall speak in thunder to England, France, and Spain. Nations o'er the ocean spread shall tremble and obey the prince who rules by freedom's laws in North America.
Welcome to the second podcast of The Confused Economist. Before we get on to the trip to America, I'll just finish off on offshore wind farms. This is motivated by the planning body of the Australian government, calling themselves the Australian Energy Market Operator, released their latest projections in a draft ISP, that's Integrated Systems Plan, in January 2024. What caught my eye was that offshore wind farms were only a small amount of the renewables. The energy transition is mainly picked up by land-based solar and wind. The projection goes out to a heroic 2050. At that time, according to the projections, we'll need 300 gigawatts of power all up. Offshore wind doesn't start until 2029 and then supplies only about 5 to 10 gigawatts of the 300 gigawatt total. So surprise, surprise, maybe I didn't need to do that podcast at all. Some other interesting things in the projection were no nuclear, obviously. This is Australia. And hydro also was only 5 to 10 gigawatts, although hydro is dispatchable. That's the word they use for possible to store it. Gas weighs in with 20 gigawatts right up to 2050, so it's still needed for firming capacity all the way along. Of course, there are lots of critical parameters in this sort of modelling, but Joe Public never gets any sensitivity analysis. For example, around the capacity factor of the renewables. If total stored or dispatchable is only 50 gigawatts, then by 2049, wind and sun have got to put out a constant 250 gigawatts, which is just over 80% of the 300 gigawatts, which 80% is the figure the government loves to quote. You can see for yourself on page 10 of the January 2024 draft ISP, figure 2, titled Capacity NEM in gigawatts, 2009-10 to 2049-50 step change. Okay, who knows, it's a long way out, and as Keynes would say, in the long run we are all dead. Okay, the trip to America. Well, why did I do this? I went over to America in October last year, 2023, to California and New Mexico. There was a bit of nostalgia in this because as a boy from 8 to 10 years old, I spent 2 years in San Francisco. Back then my father was working over there. It was a time of Kennedy, JFK's Camelot, and the heyday of the big Detroit cars. Even Elvis was alive, Viva whatever. So I went back to have a specific look-see and see how America was faring. I flew out Air Canada, crazily thinking that it was still government-owned, but it's privatised, and it put me in Vancouver. Also, I was too scared to go to the dreaded Los Angeles airport. A bit longer flight, yeah, and I needed a transit flight out of Vancouver to San Francisco, but the price was okay. The travel agent had sent me to a disappointing motel near the airport. But the thing that really got me when I got there were two signs in the lobby. The sign said, "Beware," that their rooms, built in the 1950s or 1960s, I would guess, there was a risk from fluorohydrocarbon off-gassing. Gee, I thought they'd been off-gassing for a long time. Anyway, in good old California style, it's at your risk, buddy, and that's the contract. So here we are in the land of the lawyers and the Wild West. After a couple of hours' sleep, I decided to venture out to check out Millbrae. Millbrae was the suburb that I lived back in 1959, 1961. Millbrae is about 16 miles north of downtown San Francisco and basically pretty much dominated by the Chinese. But I'm sure they've been there a long time because, hey, this is San Francisco. I decided I wanted to go up to the more upmarket suburbs further north. These are Burlingame and San Mateo. They're not really part of the valley, but they're the older, more affluent suburbs. Maybe we could say old money, not sure. Okay, in the interest of competition, there's a very nice symbiosis between the railway lines in Millbrae. There's the original Caltrain railway line, and then there's the BART, Bay Area Rapid Transport. And Millbrae is where the BART stops and the Caltrain takes over. Before the BART arrived, Caltrain had the monopoly railway line all the way to downtown San Francisco. The Caltrain is pretty brutal. Big freight train diesels and carriages with no padding. If you fell, you wouldn't come out of it well. But they had a couple of carriages dedicated to cycling with a mezzanine overhang where you could watch over your bike. So the Caltrain informed my overall impression of America, which didn't change much through the whole trip. I define it as brutal efficiency. Yep, you're well informed and it works, but it ain't subtle. Welcome to the USA. So I've got 2 days in San Francisco to recover from the jet lag before I pick up a rental car and head south to drive Big Sur and make my way down to San Diego. What next? Had dinner about 6 p.m. in Millbrae, which was about a 25-minute walk from the motel. The motel was actually on the bay. But the bay is no Sydney Harbour. It's big, but looks a bit sparse, but fairly homogeneous scenery. It does improve, to be fair, when you head downtown San Francisco and start to see the likes of Alcatraz and the Bay Bridges rearing their head. After the walk up to Millbrae, I find a Malaysian restaurant among all the Chinese ones. This turns out not so great, mistaking the milky Malaysian chai, which I hate, for Chinese tea. Bloody English colonists putting milk in their tea, or maybe Malayan planters, who knows. So next morning, better jump on the BART and get into downtown Frisco. BART has pretty good information, but you don't get the impression that BART stations are well maintained. But it does get the job done, and it does go by the airport, and probably better than a lot of other alternatives in other US cities. BART gets me downtown, and I get out with almost a 40-minute walk in front of me to get down to the San Francisco Bay Port, the Embarcadero. Don't know if I pronounced that properly. Spanish for the port. So one of my two fears about this trip start coming into play. The first is driving a rental on the right-hand side of the road, more later on that. And the second was being run over by a self-driving car. Given all the hype in the media, I'm expecting to run the gauntlet, Blade Runner-like, of hundreds of Google Waymos coming at me. I keep telling myself to be vigilant and look left, not right, as I cross over. But in 40 minutes I only see one travelling under 40k with two guys in it looking animated as they watch the dials, etc. At least they are having fun playing the disruptor games. I make it to the wharf where there's plenty of cruise ships and find my way down to the Fisherman's Wharf. Except for the visiting sea lions, they're obviously getting well fed. I'm not too sure if Fisherman's Wharf is worth a visit. Highly commercial and not that big. So nothing was really grabbing me. Maybe I wasn't looking at the right stuff. So I started to circle back via Telegraph Hill and find a restaurant. I find one in the back streets, but it's pretty unimpressionable. I can't even remember what I ate. As I find my way back to the BART, there are plenty restaurants and plenty happening, but none of them still not really grabbing me. But the place is coming alive as we're hitting about 6:30 p.m. Everybody's coming home from work. I come across 30 police motorcycles all parked in a row and 30 uniformed police all sitting in front of a cafe. And I wonder what that's all about. Later that night on the news, I find out that a local dignitary had died and these guys were the honor guard. Looks great. This is America. It's still pretty early, and as a detour, I decide I'll take the BART across the bay to Oakland, thinking it will be crossing on the Golden Gate Bridge and I will get free rider views. But damn it, the BART tunnels under the bay and I sit there in darkness. I jump out at the first stop, West Oakland, thinking it might have a village atmosphere. But the business of America is business, and it's a container port. I give up, decide to give Berkeley a miss, too old to hang around unis, and jump back on the BART and back to Millbrae. I get back to the motel, I check there's no off-gassing, and don't get a great night's sleep. Pretty noisy, not the greatest motel, but it's best to stay upstairs, not downstairs. Most motels I've found were 2 stories, and you got to drag your bags up, but I think it's worth it. But then I guess a lot of buildings built in the 50s and 60s have no soundproofing, or has everything just off-gassed away. There's a pick-up party going on in the motel car park, but at 6 p.m. the management tell them to disperse. They comply, and I figure America is a pretty orderly society, and the drivers are okay too. Well, at least around San Francisco. This is my in-depth personality analysis. The pushback might be, buddy, you're in the well-off areas of Frisco and you ain't seen nothing yet. Next morning I take the motel shuttle bus to the airport to pick up the car. I've got to jump on the monorail shuttle thing, which San Francisco airport has. Looks like a toy, but actually is pretty good as it takes you around to just about everywhere. All the terminals, the BART station, and the rental station. A word on the airport. It's named after Frisco's assassinated gay mayor, Harvey Milk. Yep, this is the USA where the right to carry goes back to the 1776 revolution and the Minutemen who kept their guns under the bed so they could muster at a moment's notice when the British approached. The airport has a West Coast cool look with plenty of artworks and easy chair sitting nooks. Probably the best choice of food compared to LA, San Diego and Albuquerque airports I find myself in later. Okay, now I'm starting to get worried. I haven't driven in over 20 years on the right-hand side of the road. Yeah, and I'm pretty paranoid about the whole deal, much more than the Waymos. I get off at the rental station and unbeknownst to me, it's a long weekend, Columbus Day. But just like Australia, Invasion Day, in America, Indigenous tribes are calling it Indigenous Peoples Day. So of course everybody's queuing for a car and the person next to me says they are driving to the Napa Valley to do wine tasting. After a bit of a wait I get to the counter and get squeezed for more dollars. Everybody complains about this as they get done for more insurance for rental cars. But hey, this is America and the business of America is business, more specifically profit. Given the horror stories about medical bills, I quite happily submit to being squeezed again. I tick every box, go for the highest cover, even though I thought I'd already paid this in Australia, but I'm too jet-lagged to worry and too paranoid to care. But the thing that really got me is I get to the end and she's milked me for just about every dollar, and she says to me, when you fill the car up on your journey, can you still try and use our garages because we're cheaper? I thought, wow, that's what I call upselling. Okay, I'm given the keys, I go downstairs and now you're on your own. There's a car somewhere there. You track it down, you get in the car and then you go, oh shit, what do I do now? Luckily I've got a service road out of the airport which maybe I shouldn't travel on, which lets me dodge the freeway and I'm able to get back to Millbrae. This is the homing instinct kicking in. But it's time to get to Monterey, which is half a day's drive, and being in America, well, no problem. I go up Millbrae Avenue, passing the leafy suburban homes, and at the top of the hill there's a freeway, conveniently waiting for me there, and off we go. Within half an hour I come to a suburb called Pacifica. Gee, I don't know, maybe it's the Terrigal, Stanwell Tops, Kiama of Sydney. a Great Ocean Road to Victoria. But hey, I can see the Pacific Ocean and it looks good, and Big Sur doesn't start to south of Monterey, but I'm on the Pacific Coast Highway, PCH, and this will do. I'm now hoping to get the Great American Sandwich. This is like mega size compared to what you get in Oz, with the things bursting out of its wrapper. And sure enough, I'm in luck. I come across at Montara Beach the Gherkin's Sandwich Shop. It's got 100 varieties, overlooks the clifftop beaches, and an enterprising Latinos in his 30s is busy dishing out sandwiches to all and sundry. I got the pulled chicken with the pineapple. Didn't know you can pull chicken, but this is America. But I should have ordered the Dutch Crunch, which everybody else did. But boy, it's a big sandwich. It's good. I toss it down, practice driving around the big back streets of Montara Beach, and then feel a bit more confident to get on my way to Monterey. Hey, you can Google the sandwich shop if you want. It's got a website, http://www.eatgherkins.com. English spelling of gherkins, Gherkins, in Montara Beach. After the Gherkins shop, driving down to Monterey wasn't too exciting. Maybe because I got bogged down in peak hour traffic in Santa Cruz, not realizing it's the coastal retreat for the well-heeled Silicon Valley commuters out of San Jose, and the final approach to Monterey was inland, and all kind of busy because of the long weekend, because this is a Friday. The road turns inland and traffic's building up as I come into Monterey. I eventually find a motel strip, not in the best part of town, and a couple of miles from the bay. All hell's breaking loose as the holiday makers are pulling in and piling out of their cars, and I'm starting to think, oh, this is Columbus Day, it's a long weekend, it's Friday night, and I better race to the reception office for a room. Otherwise I could be in trouble. I missed the first one, but get the second one, and even though they're down to their last 2 bedrooms. After my first day on the road, I didn't do much that night and pick up drinking yogurt at a nearby drugstore, as the drive-in and the takeaways don't look so appealing. So I actually started living on liquid yogurt, or drinking yogurt, for this trip. A no-fuss, no drama breakfast, because the breakfasts in a lot of America aren't that great, with the brewed, stewed coffee taken with the cream, which is a white chemical powder. The tourist attractions in Monterey are Cannery Road and the aquarium. Well, that's the 2 I picked out. It's probably more. So the next morning I get down there to Cannery Road and the aquarium to take a look. I see a supermarket with a parking lot near the cannery, but a security guard is looking at me, making sure I don't free ride in the car park. So I'm forced to go to the public car park and pay $20 for half a day. All the fuss about Cannery Row is because of the American author Steinbeck's book of the same name. It's apparently a folksy story set in the cannery's sardine factories during the Great Depression and the characters that make up the town. The Cannery Row looks great. Rows of black wooden 2-story buildings, but the shops with the souvenirs come over as a tourist trap. The canneries are set on Monterey Bay, which was the main port discovered by early Spanish explorers. Apparently, early sea explorers could never find San Francisco Bay. You couldn't see it easily from sea, with Alcatraz Island like a cork in a bottle, so obscuring the bay entrance if you're out at sea, it would make it look like continuous land. So crazily, San Francisco Bay wasn't discovered till decades after the Spanish set up shop in Monterey. I get down to the aquarium and the bottom feeder brain kicks in. I'll pay cash because every use the credit card I'm going to cop a conversion fee. But cash is no longer king. Let Visa take care of the accounting, especially with all our untrained staff after the pandemic. But there you go. I know it's the same in Sydney, but I'm not copping conversion currency fees there. So somebody has to come out especially. And when they do that, they send out the smarter college students who are on StuVac, and so they sort it out. But you're told right away, we won't be able to give you any change. Okay, no problem. I reckon the change is less than the conversion fee. Oh, I should explain, I'm also packing, I shouldn't use that word, I'm carrying a Wise prepaid currency card. So holding US in cash as I go along spotting ATMs. My favourite ATMs are Citibank and Chase. There's always the big ones. And it's costing me about $4.50 a transaction. The aquarium is pretty good. I get a bit of a bonus, or should I say positive externality, because it's in one of the old Cannery Row sardine factories and they've got some of the factory equipment and a bit of a story there. So I'm quite happy getting two for the price of one. The aquarium, as it turns out, was a guy started by David Packard. That's the P in HP as in Hewlett Packard. In the photos he looks a pretty switched on guy, and they have a picture of him as a volunteer welding in the early days of setting up the aquarium. I don't know whether it's a PR stunt, but there he is welding away. So after the aquarium, I've got to get down south towards Big Sur, so off we go. Big Sur starts pretty soon, or at least the scenery does, about 40 miles south of Monterey. To me, this was the mother of all coastal strips. The mountains come right down to the water, so there's hardly any towns on it, and it curves and bends, giving enticing views all the way down the coast. I would score the whole thing, all the way from Monterey to, say, outside Los Angeles, as 20 times Vic's Great Ocean Road and 100 times New South Wales Stanwell Tops. We probably shouldn't lose sight of the fact that Big Sur was pretty much inaccessible into the 1930s when the New Deal put people back to work, and Big Sur Coastal Road was one of the projects. It's about a day trip and just goes on and on and on, but spectacular. Worth doing if you go that way, but I think you got to use private car. I don't know if they let buses on it. Anyway, pretty soon a sign pops up saying Big Sur is closed due to a landslide about halfway down. I press on a bit longer, but eventually I have to turn around and go back to Monterey. There is no way over these steep coastal mountains. So if you are going to do it, you have to split it into two parts, from the north and then from the south. About half a day each if you push it. Back at Monterey, I get on the inland interstate, which is your dry Californian desert. And off you go, join in the pack, racing south on the plain, the other side of the impenetrable coastal mountains. Okay, it's the easiest country to drive around, but the riskiest if you have an accident. They say due to the medical bills. Plenty of horror stories abound. However, as a guy who has trouble twisting his neck, I'm reliant on the blind spot warning mirrors with the flashing light. This saved my life a couple of times, so this is a must when driving in another country, whether right-hand side or left-hand side, especially when you don't know where you're going. Probably need one at home too. It's quite a hot and dusty, boring trip on the interstate down to LA, plenty of cars and trucks. So I decide I'm going to come off well before LA, heading for a place called Cambria, which looks to be a nice seaside village. Got a motel strip, and it's a long weekend, and I've pre-booked the Fogcatcher Inn on Moonstone Beach Drive, which was pretty upmarket for me, paying over $200 a night. You can check it out at https://www.fogcatcherin.com. So I get off the highway to cut over to Cambria, which pretty much marks the end of Big Sur. And Cambria is not that far from Hearst Castle, San Simeon, built by the newspaper magnate Randolph Hearst. More on Randolph later. The cross-country drive proves to be pretty interesting. There's plenty of agriculture and plenty of Latinos working the fields. I don't think the US has a problem with lack of labor force supply. It gets politicized, sure, but that's the great immigration debate, which never looks at fundamentals except when there is a problem of undersupply in another country. Did somebody say China and Japan? Of course, when it comes to labor supply, I guess we better mention COVID, post-pandemic, and all that. I'll digress on this. Okay, the first guy that I know of who predicted fundamental changes after only 6 months into the pandemic was the historian Simon Schama. He knew about past pandemics right back to the Roman Empire and said that labor costs would go up, or had gone up after most of them. So he pretty much got that right. And further, economic history has made a bit of a comeback, albeit since the GFC, because no economist models really predicted the GFC. There was probably plenty of noise around saying it was all going to go wrong. The hero was probably Nouriel Roubini. He's the guy who predicted it was going to blow up. But he's been able to trade on that ever since. Well, why not? So while we're here about the GFC and then the long recovery and then the pandemic, let's not forget Bitcoin, where some say that the 2009 Satoshi white paper was motivated by a mistrust of fiat money, that is government-controlled currency. But for the best explanation, check out the following clip on YouTube for an entertaining explanation of fiat money versus Bitcoin. You'll need to search Bitcoin rap battle debate, Hamilton versus Satoshi. Worth a look. I'm running out of gas and fill up in a place called Guadalupe. Honestly, you don't have to go to Mexico. Gas was about $5.50 a gallon in California last October 2023, but only $3.50 a gallon in New Mexico when I got there. More on gas prices later in part 2 of the podcast. I finally turn west back towards the coast and it's all pretty exciting. The first thing I see is low-flying US acrobatic jets swooping down a valley. Then as I enter the foothills to get down to the coast, I get a wildfire or bushfire warning on the mobile, and then not long later a helicopter swoops in front of me and dips water out of the lake, and then I go past an army of guys, all in uniform, who are off to fight the fire. Am I going to make it to Cambria? It's October and they've still got wildfires. Climate change, anybody? Or as the Greenland ice sheet melts, the land rises. What? Yeah, it's complicated. But as I come down to the coast, it all goes away. No more warnings, and I have a leisurely drive into Cambria and get to the hotel room. So here I am on the coast. It's an American long weekend. Everybody's happy. It's all in holiday mode. There was plenty of wildlife and driftwood on the beaches. I decided that driftwood, which is piled up, is for bonfires to celebrate Columbus Day. When I ask, is this the case, I'm put straight. No way, this is to be left in its natural state. Anyway, no bonfire, so I console myself with my new theory. Does the Big Sur part of the west coast of California have more wildlife and kelp because it's unpopulated? And also, it dawns on me, the coast is continuous from Chile to Alaska. That's huge. Now, I don't know if a seal could swim from Chile all the way up to Alaska, but any time you can get out of the sea and have a rest, as the two continents have an uninterrupted coast. No gaps like Antarctic to Australia and then on to Asia. Anyway, so plenty of sea lions hanging around. This time that's where they live. Not like thanks for all the Fisherman's Wharf, waiting around for the free feed. So to finish off the day, a guy comes down and he plays the bagpipe as the sun sinks slowly in the west. A cheer goes up as the sun extinguishes itself in the ocean and the piper finishes playing. I go into town and I find a New England restaurant, the Sow's Ear. Now this is what I am looking for, something totally different. Reflective of early revolutionary America. 1765 and all that. That's the music that intros and finishes this podcast, by the way. Now, okay, I am a bit confused. I should be on the East Coast, not on the West Coast, the Wild West. But anyway, give me poet's license there. I order a dish called salmon and parchment, where the salmon poached in parchment paper comes out incredibly moist. Check out the website of the Sow's Ear. Absolutely amazing menu. It's at http://thesowsear.com. The Cambria Village Main Street is full of other interesting restaurants and a lot of decorated stuffed dummies, witches and weird men dotted in the front yards of the houses, open areas, and the windows of the shops. This is a thing that the village does for Halloween, and it goes on for the whole month of October, not just the one night of trick-or-treat. Okay, next morning I start off early, travelling north to do the bottom half of Big Sur that I'd missed. Takes me about 3 to 4 hours from Cambria before I hit the landslide and have to turn around. Once again, simply stunning scenery. There was only one or two camping grounds and small settlements along the way, and I check out where the landslide has occurred, and it's a mega landslip and doesn't look easy to fix. Apparently the road has been closed for over 2 years now. But I'm happy to retrace because you're on the other side of the road, you get a different aspect, and the view is just great. On the way back just out of Canberra, I stop at the Sea Lion Beach for another look at the sea with the hundreds of other tourists. The sea lions have roared back from extinction. The blurb says mankind thought they were all gone but found the remaining few on an island off the coast. Through protection measures, they brought them back. Very commendable. The Hearst Mansion is a must-see, especially if you want to live the glory days of America's newspaper barons and movie stars like Charles Chaplin from the 1920s and 30s. The young Randolph Hearst was a bit of a dreamy boy, and the castle was his mystical vision, and the boy did sure fulfill it in adulthood. Both his mother and father, Dad making his money as a savvy mining engineer, were well off, but worried that Randolph would blow all the dough if and when he got control of it to build his castle. I get there just in time to catch the last bus tour that takes you up to the castle. The big deal as we go up is that there are still remnants of the private zoo, so look out for the zebras which are still roaming around the property as you drive up. We get up to the top of the hill and the first house is mansion enough, but that's just where the celebrities stayed. Then comes the big house. The guide is really good and tells us some of the anecdotes. Hearst wanted to get to know the movers, shakers and personalities of the day. So we would invite them all up for the weekend from Los Angeles. They'd come by train and then car. You dress for Saturday night dinner, and after that there'd be a showing of the latest movie in his large private cinema, followed the next morning with swimming and tennis. In the early days when he was a boy and his parents owned the land, by horse and drawn cart to get up there. If you were a first-time guest and of sufficient interest to Hearst, you'd start off sitting next to him at the big table. But if you found the next night you were moved down to the end of the very large table, that was a signal that it was time for you to go. I wonder if any of the economists of the day got an invite. I suppose you should call them political economists back then, or even moral philosophers. Let me know at confusedeconomistdoes@gmail.com if you know more on this. The guy goes above and beyond the call of duty. He not only waves us goodbye as we start off on the bus, but he takes a shortcut through the foliage for a second goodbye wave as the bus turns the corner. This is a service standard without parallel, in my opinion. The trust sets up by the Hearst is quite interesting. It still survives to this day and won't finish up until his last living relative dies. The trust seems pretty savvy to me. They have given the state of California the expense and problems of maintaining the mansions and conducting the tours, but the trust hangs on to the land. Lucky zebras, I say. But this might be a lesson for all of us in an ever-growing populous world. Land, the only asset that God's not making any more of. Okay, so how about a condo down by the seaside just outside of Canberra and relive the opulent dinners as a paying guest up at the big house? Yes, it's all possible. This is America. For a mere $1,000 you can relive those days at one of the occasional dinner events followed by a movie in that same private theatre at St. Simeon where Randolph sat with all his famous guests. Check out https://foundation@hearstcastle.com. All one word for foundation at Hearst Castle. Look at the events tab and see when the next one's on. Unfortunately, Randolph's party came to an end with the great crash of 1929 and he was forced to relinquish control of much of his empire. Finally, he was a guy who inspired Orson Welles' Citizen Kane. So back down to Canberra for my final night, and I went to a restaurant on the beach where I had the clam chowder, which uses an open-cut round loaf as an edible soup bowl. But make sure you get all the liquid out first, as I broke off the edge and it overflowed on the table. This is a fairly common dish I found in America, and the signature is the bread bowl. Okay, so now it's time to get on the road again. What am I going to do about Los Angeles? Well, I've decided I'm not going to go there. Okay, I'm probably going to miss a lot, but it's a city of 8 million people. The movie thing doesn't grab me anymore. I wish it would, but it doesn't. So let's head south to San Diego, America's finest city, and bypass LA. Whatever, smart move, who knows. Okay, so I pick out an Airbnb in a place called Goleta. Still a long way from LA and not even that close to Santa Monica and Santa Barbara where it all starts. Goleta is really nowhere, but it's the first built-up area and it continues this way all the way down to San Diego. San Diego being only an hour's drive from LA. My first stop for morning coffee is at Pismo Beach. I have to admit that this is motivated by Rick Stein's road trip to Mexico, which starts out in San Francisco and ends way down in Mexico. Now, okay, I'll come clean. That's about the extent of my research for this trip. When Rick gets to LA, he didn't really get up to much, finding plenty of Latinos but not great markets. Then a few old-timers tell him LA isn't what it used to be. He does find a restaurant famous for visiting movie celebrities by being the model of discretion. I give San Luis Obispo a miss because it's inland and a bit hotter, even though they say it's great for wine tasting. So Rick did make a stop at Pismo Beach, so why not me? When I get to Pismo Beach, it's pretty busy, but there is parking, plenty of people as it's the last day of the long weekend, and I find a specialty coffee place in a back street, which is not a Starbucks but trying to be. The place has wide sandy beaches, a long boardwalk and a pier with plenty happening. Okay, so back in the car and we've got to get to Goleta. The Airbnb looks pretty low rent, but it's only going to be one night. I knock on the door and the husband answers and immediately handballs me to the wife. I'm put in one of the 3 rooms, pretty tawdry, but with ensuite, really my only requirement. I decide not to go out and live on fruit and drinking yogurt. So I'm trapped in there. I might as well check out American free-to-air TV, and it's abysmal, just like home. All good stuff has gone beyond the paywall or subscription. Economists say this is more efficient as people can directly express their preferences. But nevertheless, it seems to me that over the years the anti-siphoning list has been watered down. Anyway, FTA no longer gets the advertising revenue, so it's pretty much all over. Of course, bottom feeders can wait out for 5 years for much of the content, but not all of it will turn up on FTA, eking out the last marginal royalties if it can be dislodged from the pay catalogue. I watch a bit of baseball and college football, but I don't find any of it particularly compelling. There's quite a bit of aircraft noise, and I check Google Maps to see the Airbnb is close to the Santa Barbara airport. And I can't believe how busy it is, being only a regional airport. Hell, the US must go everywhere by plane. As I leave the next morning, the husband comes out. I think he's probably feeling a bit sorry for me. Asks me where I'm heading. Says I should get down to the Santa Monica Pier, where it all goes down in the early evening. I sort of tell him maybe next time, but thanks for the advice. So I'm pretty hungry, had no dinner, and end up at a Cajun kitchen restaurant for breakfast. Pretty busy, it's still holiday period. They don't really have anything Cajun, maybe some French bread rolls to pass for it, but nothing else unless you go for the chocolate chip pancakes. Okay, I have to bypass LA, and sure enough, there's plenty of freeways will take you around. And once again, thanks for the blind spot monitors for saving my life. And all in all, the bypass trip is pretty gruesome. Not gruesome, but busy. I'm sure it probably would have been okay, and others probably shouldn't listen to me. Get down to the beaches and lap it all up. Okay, but I don't have the body of the Adonis, so I give the coastal strip of LA a miss. Maybe next time. LA does has one of the few toll roads in California which will speed you along the LA coastal strip, but I opt not to do it. This probably makes sense in a city of 8 million on a public holiday. I finally see a freeway sign saying San Diego and traffic speeds up. As soon as I can, I get off the freeway and get onto the more leisurely coastal roads. This takes me to a place called Carlsbad, which seems pretty good. Coastal again, wide beaches, looking pretty good. I assume it's an outlying northern suburb of San Diego, or southern suburb of LA, however you want to put it. In Carlsberg, I suddenly realised that I've stuffed up my Airbnb booking and I'm not due till tomorrow night in San Diego. I ring them up in a panic, and luckily there's not too much happening at their place. That is, they have a free night and I'm able to get in early. Okay, so no problem. They've saved the day and they tell me not to come till 6 o'clock. I think that's because they've probably got 3 jobs if you add in the Airbnb. Americans work hard, let's be honest. Okay, it's only 3-4 o'clock. I try to ease down, relax a bit, as I haven't got much to do between 3 and 6 p.m. Then I achieve what I thought might happen. I get picked up for the cops for driving too slow along the Carlsbad Strip. I play the useless Australian card and run the argument that we drive on the left-hand side, so I need to be cautious. I wonder if the guy is pissed off because he thought he got quota with a drunk driver. He doesn't breathalyze me. This is what I like about the US. They make an assessment looking at you. So he tells me, you better drive to the speed limit, buddy. At this stage I think, oh God, I'm pretty wrung out, so I stop at one of the ice cream shops nearby and order the dark cherry, which is pretty good. I don't know why we don't have dark cherry ice cream here in Oz. As I eat it, I see the Pacific Surf liner rattle by, which also applies the coastal route between San Diego and LA. I resolved to take it when I returned to San Diego from New Mexico. More on the surf liner in part 2 of the podcast as I make my return journey to San Francisco. But the challenge is not over yet. I've got to find the Airbnb about 16 miles outside San Diego in a suburb called City Heights. The area is predominantly a Latino district, like a lot of the parts of Southwest America. And although it looks a bit run down, mainly the broken down footpaths that I seem to find everywhere in the US. The hosts aren't Latinos and they're a bit aspirational as Americans, telling me they bought another Airbnb in Tennessee, and the next morning some sort of container is dropped off to which the host is busily loading up furniture to ship to the Airbnb in Tennessee. Gee, America, always trying to improve itself. I am shown to the Fairmont room with its private entrance and private bathroom where the small clawfoot bath looks like a death trap, which they have cleverly made a feature of in the ad. Great marketing, turning a negative into a positive. Parking is tight but free, and most nights I manage to get fairly close to the house. So I decide to have a quiet night and take a walk around the district. This leads me to my main insight on this trip. Apart from the fiscal debt and the big interest bill, the US is geopolitically very well positioned. No problem, they cleverly bought Alaska in 1867. Remember, God's not making any more land. And have the like-minded Canadians to the north. Interestingly, they have in the past approached Denmark to buy Greenland, which could prove a winner with climate change as the ice pares back and reveals lots of mineralogy. You have to accept there'll be winners and losers in climate change within reasonably contained temperature ranges. That is, we don't shrivel up as things migrate north or south depending what hemisphere you are in. Watch this space. If Trump gets in, he loves the deal, but in reality, I can't see the Danes selling. But with a small Greenland population of under 60,000, less than a Taylor Swift concert, Greenlanders might feel they have nothing to lose. That's the great advantage America has as the world's reserve currency. Or some say they're going to lose it soon. So maybe they should make Denmark an offer they can't refuse while they've still got the world's reserve currency. Go figure. What about the Mexican border, you say? It was on the news most nights I was there, with mayors in the southwest of the country sending illegal refugees by bus up to the East Coast and telling the libertarian East Coast politicians, okay, you know so much, you deal with it. Yep, political grandstanding, that's true. But economically, I think this is a blessing in disguise, as a continual influx to the labour force avoids the decline of the working-age workforce seen in Japan and now many are saying China. Okay, time for pushback. Confused economists, you haven't taken into account productivity. Well, I don't know much about it, but anyway. For example, on a GDP per capita basis, Australia is declining due to non-increasing productivity. And worse still, it could be argued that increased immigration is contributing to increases in rents and hence inflation. On the other hand, US productivity doesn't appear to be declining, but slightly increasing in the aggregate. But the picture may look quite mixed if broken down into the separate states. Let me know at confusedeconomistrs@gmail.com if you know about productivity stuff. So, not feeling threatened by the hard-working Latino community, I walk up to the nearest large supermarket. Probably would not have done that in New York. Many years ago I spent some time in New York, and back then it was don't go above 80th Street, otherwise you'll be in trouble. I get to the supermarket and once again I feel I could be in Mexico. Admittedly, the border being on an hour's drive from San Diego. El Super 51, amigos, is stocked with Latino or Mexican products. I order the usual flavoured drinking yogurt and it tastes like it's made of real strawberries. What's going on? Must be a NAFTA thing. It turns out El Super 51 is part of Chedraui USA, which operates 132 of these stores in the US and is a subsidiary of Grupo Comercial Chedraui, Mexico's third largest retailer. I must be in the 51st store. The next morning, the next challenge comes. I got to drive down to San Diego downtown to check out the sights. How do I do this and how do I park for free? Well, you got to go to the San Diego Zoo, which is backstopped by the site of the 1915-16 World's Fair. Free parking comes at a cost, and I decided to do the 40-minute walk to the harbour in the interest of first exercise. As I walk along, I wonder why downtown areas of San Francisco and San Diego are so lightly trafficked by vehicles. It's the road network, stupid. No through or transit traffic. It's all funneled around the downtown areas. Get to the water and the World War II USS Midway, as there is a floating museum with a bunch of interesting decommissioned planes on its flight deck. The harbour walkway leads around to the famous larger-than-life statue, Unconditional Surrender, now considered anti-woke, paralleling male triumph in World War II with seduction as the sailor crushes his girlfriend in an overpowering embrace. Probably shouldn't lose sight of the fact that the women did most of the industrial work while the guys were fighting, but yep, there it is, Unconditional Surrender. Make of it what you will. Right up and down San Diego Harbour there are Navy warships as far as the eye can see, though I suspect many are decommissioned, and who knows if they could ever be brought back into service. I see a rather futuristic-looking catamaran making its way up the bay and then out to sea. Definite military vehicle. I wonder if it's one of the Tasmanian ones or built by the Australian company Austal. Some sort of deal whereby US Navy is trying to diversify and build allied partner shipbuilding capability. Austal constructs smaller ships in Perth, Western Australia and Mobile, Alabama. There was a rumour a while back that Austal could be taken over by one of the big US defence companies, but my view is only if it goes broke, not unlike Paramount's takeover of Network 10 when it went belly up back here in Australia. Okay, next morning I go back down to the San Diego Zoo and into town, and there is still lots more to see. Next to the zoo is the 1915-1916 World's Fair site. And while pavilions are mock European, they look okay. There are also little houses where participating countries still have their exhibitions from back then. I'd really like to see inside what those countries were presenting themselves as. Mind you, it's in the middle of World War I, but America didn't take part until 1917, and I imagine outside of Europe, South America and Asian countries were largely unaffected. But I miss out as they're only open on Sunday, maybe next time. I decide against the 40-minute walk and get on the hop-on, hop-off tourist bus that will drop me back at the zoo. But first it'll take me downtown to see the Gaslight District and then over to the Coronado. To get to the Coronado, you have to go over San Diego's equivalent of the Golden Gate Bridge, although it's concrete and much uglier. The Coronado comes over as an upmarket suburb like Neutral Bay in Sydney and Brighton in Melbourne. Hotel Coronado is an early 20th century turreted building, famous for being in the movie Some Like It Hot, an old movie I must admit, Tony Curtis and Jack Lemmon, way back. Next morning I have my last negotiation with the small clawfoot bath, and it's time to drop off the car and fly to New Mexico, the land of enchantment. The subject of Part 2 of this podcast, the trip to America. Part 2. See you in New Mexico. Bye for now.
Lift up your hands, ye heroes, and swear with proud disdain. The wretch that would ensnare you shall spread his net in vain. Should Europe empty all her force, will meet them in array, and fight and shout and fight for free America. We led fair freedom hither, and lo, the desert smiled. A paradise of pleasure was opened in the wild. Your harvest bold Americans, no power shall snatch away. Preserve, preserve, preserve your rights in a free America. Torn from a world of tyrants beneath this western sky, we formed a new dominion, a land of liberty. The world shall own we're freemen here, and such will ever be. Huzzah, 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 for free America. Some future day shall crown us the masters of the main. Our fleet shall speak in thunder to England, France, and Spain. Nations o'er the ocean spread shall tremble and obey the prince who rules by freedom's laws in North America.